This is the third video on the Python interview video series. In this video, we are going to discuss about what are the basic data types that a Python can handle. So, data types, in the case, we are going to see about what are the kinds of data that a Python interpreter can handle, and what are the types of data that Python interpreter can produce as an output. So, these are the things that we are going to discuss in this particular video. So the first question in this series is that what are the basic data types that is used in Python? Or you list out the basic data types which are found in Python. In both the cases, you can answer like this. You start off answering with the necessity of data type, what is data type and the significance of data type, and then proceed to the list of the data types. So the answer would be like this. See, data type is an attribute associated with a piece of data that tells the computer system how to interpret its value. For example, I'm going to say number 7. You have to say to the computer that it is a number and it is not a string. Even though we type 7 in both the cases, the 7 from string and 7 from a number will be treated differently by the computer system. So data type, understanding the data type ensures that data is collected in the preferred format and the value of each property is as expected. Okay, so now we are coming to the in terms of Python and in terms of other programming languages. In most of the programming languages, we need to declare what type of a data we are going to use before we are using it. We call them as declaration of the variable. Here in Python, we have a freedom of that. We have straightly assigned any kind of value to any variable. By understanding, by getting the value, Python looks into the value. Okay, what kind of a value this is? Then it will decide then appropriate data type for it. Okay, in case of assigning. And in case of we are giving an input in console screen by using a function input. Input is a function that prompts the user to give its input, and it will be treated as string that will be discussed for a while. Now we are coming to what are the kinds of data types that a Python language can handle. Of course, it can handle alphabets or group of alphabets. We call them as strings, strings, strings. And numbers. In numbers, we can deal with whole numbers or decimal numbers or a complex number. And one particular place where Python outperforms all other competitors or sequence type. And to be properly said, string also comes under sequence. Okay, then what is a sequence? So as of now, we spoke about one input value, whether it is a string or a number or a complex number or a float. Now, in most of the cases, as we discussed earlier, there can be we deal with a group of inputs for a person. For every entity, we can deal with a group of data. Whenever we need to store about group of related data together, we need to have such a kind of data type that has to be supported by the programming language. Here, Python supports four or five different kinds of sequences, of which list is very important. List is an ordered mutable sequence, and which is followed by tuple, range, and dictionary, sets, and frozen set. Also there is a special type of data type that the Python is handling is boolean type. Boolean can take true or false. Whenever we give a true or false as an input statement, instead of we go and save it as a string and later on we are comparing, or save it in 0 and 1 we are comparing, we can directly use boolean type. Okay, and again I'm reminding you, there is no need to declare any kind of variables while we are assigning some values. Okay, and by default, whatever the value you are giving through console, through the input function, that will be treated as string objects irrespective of the data types. Okay, so if you wanted to use number, if I wanted to give 7 using input function, through input function, that will be treated as string only. So in order to convert that into a number, I need to do some type conversions that we will see in the next series of videos.
And here the next question is, what are the Python numeric inputs? What are the possible ways you can give number as an input? And there are three main types that Python can receive numbers as an input. And first is integers. Integers means whole number, the positive and negative whole numbers without any decimals. There you can see examples 5 and 7. Of course, you wanted to give negative numbers, you can also give negative numbers as well. And float consists of course positive and negative numbers, but with fractional parts as 5.3, 9.2, 7.7 likewise. And a complex number is that it has its real part and imaginary part, and imaginary part ends with j. So there is an example there, 3 plus 5j. Here the real part is 3 and the imaginary part is 5. So it's very tricky to give an complex number as an input, and you want to perform some operations on complex numbers. It is now the Python gives us a feature that you can directly manipulate complex numbers. Unlike C or Java, you have to write some functions to manipulate the real part sometimes, and the imaginary part in two different places. Then we club together in the same form by using a structure. So here it is not the case. You can manipulate it directly.
So the very next question we are dealing with that right next to data types is how to find out the data type, how to find out which type of a data we are dealing right now. Since we don't have any declaration in the Python script, there is no need to declare any variable in the Python script while you are assigning. Python itself knows by reading the value, what type of a value it is, it itself knows. So somewhere else in the program, in the middle of a program, you wanted to know what type of a data you are dealing with. So in that case, you can make use of the function called type, which is a built-in function in Python. There you can see the examples there. We are assigning three type of values to x, and the very next line we're trying to display what is the type of the same variable x and how it changes from one type to another type. And initially we assign a variable, the value of f of x equal to 5. So there the type of x is integer. There you can see in the output screen straight away. And the next line we are assigning into a float value. There it becomes a float, the x becomes a float. And finally we are going to assign a string. Whatever that is enclosed inside a single quote or double quote, we would call them as a string. So now the same x has been converted into a string variable. So you can see the last line of the output screen, the class string. And you has to note one important thing here. Here we are going to know what kind of a data type, or it refers directly or indirectly to an object only. There is no independent value we are dealing with. We are dealing with a kinds of object. There you can see before int or float or string, there is a word called class. So these all are an objects. So whatever you are dealing with, a number or a float or whatever the kind of a data can be, it will be treated as an object only. Okay. Even the type function also gives us what type of a object it is. So this is a tricky part here.
So what is a Boolean data type is the next question. As we discussed earlier, Boolean data type can take two values, either 0 or 1. 1 refers to true and 0 refers to false. So in this case, we are not giving 0 and 1 directly. Instead of that, we give true or false. You just look at the example screenshot below. In that, there were 4 print statements. In that, we will give true plus 1 false into 99 and true plus 22 false into 2. So here the expressions was evaluated by in terms of true as 1 and false as 0, so that 1 plus 1 becomes 2, 0 times 99 becomes 0, 1 plus 22 becomes 23, and 0 times 2 becomes 0. And again, here is another type. We are using a print statement, which is an output statement, which is used to display whichever you put inside in the parenthesis. If you are put inside a double quote, it is a string, it will be displayed as such, or anything else, it will be computed or evaluated and then it will be displayed as a value. So here we are not using any double quotation, we are using only straight away we are using all those things as expressions in the parenthesis, inside the parenthesis. So that will be evaluated and computed a result, and that result will be displayed. Okay.
So the next important question here in the series is how Python is dealing input and output. So let us talk about input first. In a programming language, there are two ways of giving input. One is that by assigning the value by ourselves in the code itself, right? A equal to 5, B equal to 10, similar to that cases. And there is another way. Sometimes the developer might want to take user input at some point in the program. So to provide this feature to the users, Python is offering a function called input. There you can see in the slide is input function. Input function allows user to give input. But the thing to be noted out here is that you just look at the example. Here we wanted to give a value, a number to A. A equal to int inside the parenthesis, input inside the parenthesis, enter the value of A. So let's go to the first parenthesis. Enter the value of A. Whatever you put inside a double quotation, you know that is a string that will be displayed on the screen straight away. So here also it prompted as enter the value of A. Now we are going to enter a value, let's say 5. So now this 5 has been read by the function input. Okay. Now the problem here is Python takes all the inputs as string objects by default, that we have said already. So here the 7 is taken as a string 7. If I wanted to assign as a value, as a number, I need to convert it into integer by using a function called int. So whatever I put inside int, that will be converted into an integer. Here in this case, I'm reading an input from the user. Forget about this case. I just wanted to convert a string called 77 to integer. So simply put in that inside a double quotation and pass on to integer, that will be converted into 77. Okay. So here we need to convert explicitly by ourselves to the type which you wanted. In this case, I wanted 7 as an integer, so I am converting into int. In case if I wanted to convert into a fractional part like 7.0, what I should use? I should use float instead of int. So here now we are not only taking the input from the user, we are converting the string object, string literal into its equivalent numerical literal. Okay. Now the second important question arises: why? Why can't we do all such as such and do the operations? So if you read 7 as a string and 7 as an integer or number, what is the difference it carries? You cannot perform any arithmetic operations on a string. You can perform all the arithmetic operations, that addition, subtraction, whatever you want, that you can perform on a number only. So that is why we are converting the string 7 into the number 7, and then we are assigning it to A. So that is what the line carries. And we coming back to the output section, and it is very simple and straightforward. Print is the function that is going to flash all our input parameters onto the screen or standard output device. Here in case we call it as a screen monitor. Okay. So if I put a double quotation, which means that it considered as a string and it will be displayed as such. So in our case, there is a two example, and one example is print Python under double quotation. In this case, Python will be displayed in the screen. In the next example, print A, here the value of A is printed. So whenever you wanted to print the value of something, you have to pass the identifier name as the parameter, as the argument to the function. And here it has to be noted that print is a function, it is not a statement. In the previous versions, print acts as a statement, acts as a keyword, acts as a statement. Here it is a proper function. You have to enclose your arguments inside the parenthesis. So that's all. So the next part of the series is that type conversion. As we have just seen, we have converted a string into an integer. So let us brief on what is type conversion. So the process of converting from a value of one data type to another data type. Here the value is not converted, only we are converting from its one data type to another data type. That means we are going to tell the computer that see, it is not a string, from now onwards you have to treat it as an integer, or else in other ways. So the process of changing its data type, so I wanted to compile it to look the same 7 at as a different way, as a number. So this is called type conversion. There are two types of making it possible. One is implicit type conversion and another is explicit type conversion. So what is the implicit type conversion? This is the first type of type conversion which is done by the Python itself, and it doesn't require any user interpretation or any user instruction for that. And it works on the basis, you just look at the example below. We give an integer number 10 and a float number b 5.5, and there we made an operation or arithmetic operation that indulges both int and float, both of two different data types, right? And we added that and we saved in C. So 10 and 5.5 gets summed up and 15.5 is stored in C. And later on I went to print what is the value that is stored in C in the next print statement. Like, you just see the print, open parenthesis, inside the double quotation I write the sum of A and B is, close the quotation and comma C. There you just look at the screen, output screen right now. The sum of the A and B will be displayed as such because it is enclosed in a double quotation, though it is a string that will be displayed as such. And comma, we are going to the next parameter, and which is C. So whenever you write something without a parameter, so compiler understands that okay, this is not a string, it has a value in it. So go and search for the value which is stored in C and display it. Here 15.5 is the value that is stored in C and has been displayed. Right. So here, before proceeding into the implicit type conversion, I wanted to check what is the type of C, because I haven't assigned a value. Like as I assigned A and B. In A I am assigning an integer value, so A becomes int. In B I am assigning a float value, it becomes a float. So now it is an equation. Now it's like an expression that has both integer and float. Now whether C is an integer or a float, by looking at the result itself you could have understand that it is a float. So it converts C from integer, which is 10. Okay, so from 10 to 15.5, that is from integer to float. It don't want to lose any information. Python didn't support any loss of data. So if I go with integer, if I consider C as an integer, I can only display 15. So that 0.5 will be lost. So Python didn't want to do that. So it don't want to lose any data. So it upgrades A as 10.0 and it add a 5.5 with that and it becomes 15.5. So the type of the type of C becomes float. That you can see in the next line. I print the data type of C by calling type function, by using a type function and sending argument as C. You can also check it by A and B also there. Then the question is, what is explicit type conversion? So as you know, implicit type conversion, that Python does it by itself. Here in explicit type conversion, we the user are going to give instruction from which data type you have to convert to what data type. So here we can use some predefined functions like int, float and string to perform explicit type conversion, and this is called as typecasting. And here you can see the example. For A I assign 5.5, so A becomes float. B equal to 10, I'm assigning the value 10 to B, so B is an integer. Then I'm adding C equal to A plus B, and everyone knows what should be the output there. It is 15.5 because it does an implicit type conversion there. So you can see before explicit type conversion 15.5, that is the fourth statement, which is print statement. You can see the output screen also
for the first print line, the statement, it states like this: before explicit type conversion it is 15.5. We know how the 15.5 arrives. And the next, I try to display the type of C, so what data type it is actually, and by using the function type, then it is float. Then later on I convert the particular float integer, I mean float value C, which carries the value of 15.5 to an integer by calling a predefined function called int. So I am passing the argument C into the function int, as in the statement, sixth statement. You can see the sixth line. So there I'm converting, I take 15.5 and convert it into integer. So that 0.5 will be lost, that will be deleted, that will be stripped off, and only the 15 will be stored in C. It is equivalent to C equal to 15. Then you go to the seventh line, print after explicit conversion. I wanted to know what is there in C. You can see the print screen there out, and it will be 15 will be stored there. And after that I wanted to check whether it has been converted into integer or it is doing something else. So I wanted to check the type of C at that moment of time by using the function T, and you can see the last line of the print statement, of the output screen, it is integer. And this is called explicit type conversion. So whenever you dealing with implicit and explicit type conversion, you has to be careful with one thing. Python will always wanted to choose to go in such a way that there should not any data loss. It will not incur any data loss. So always a lower data type will be converted into higher data type. That can be done by Python itself. If you want otherwise, no, I don't want this decimal. I wanted to go with some simpler stuff. It is enough for me to have the real part itself. I mean the whole number itself, 10 or 11. I don't want the fractional part. So in that case, user has to explicitly convert to the lower data type. So this is the difference between implicit and explicit type conversion.